Today is Wednesday, August 26, 2009, and we are interviewing Jacob Wolfe at the College Park Aviation Museum. Mr. Wolfe is 87 years old and was born November 13, 1921. My name is Alan Hill. I'll be the interviewer today. Producing this CD will be Chelsea Dorman. She'll be running the camera and the sound system. Mr. Wolfe served during World War II in the Air Force. His highest rank was Tech Sergeant. He served in the theater of ETO. Welcome, Mr. Wolfe.
Thank you.
Mr. Wolfe, where are you from originally?
Indiana, Pennsylvania.
Indiana, Pennsylvania. Whereabouts is that? I'm not familiar
That's
with it.
about 45, 50 miles northeast of Pittsburgh.
Oh, okay, okay. So are you a Steelers fan?
What?
Are you a Steelers fan?
Oh, yes.
Okay, well, anyway, I just wanted to know. I just figured if you were in that area, you probably were.
You have to be.
Yeah. Okay, when you were in Pennsylvania, where did you go to school? Where did you go through, all the way through high school?
I was in Florida from 5 to 15, went most of my schooling there.
In Florida?
In Florida, at Bartow, Florida.
Okay.
I moved back to Pennsylvania when I was 15, 1937, and I went my freshman year at Cherry Tree High School, and then in the 10th, 11th, and 12th, graduated from Indiana High School in 1941.
1941. So after you graduated from high school, were you drafted, or did you get a job, or did you work for a while? And
I had a job for a while, and I enlisted.
Where was that?
That was at an auto parts store in Indiana.
Uh-huh. And something that you enjoyed, or is this something that you took up after school?
Something I was lucky to get a job after school, so I was glad.
There you go. Okay. So how long did you stay there?
Oh, probably a year or less.
Okay.
Then I went into the service.
And you went in? Did you enlist, or?
Yes, I enlisted.
You enlisted? Mr. Wolfe, what made you decide that you wanted to enlist in the Army Air Corps?
Well, like everybody else, the young men at that time, I wanted to get into the military and do something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the Air Corps interests you more than the other branches of service?
Yes, because I was told that there was a certain quota for what they called a glider pilot training.
Okay.
And I enlisted in that. And I was in the reserves at the time, and I was sent up to Teal College at Greenville, Pennsylvania. And we took airplane training in a small plane like a Piper Cub.
Okay.
Out of Meadville Airport, Meadville, Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
And with the completion of that, I got my private pilot's license and went home till I was recalled to active duty. I went to active duty in Fort Meade, Maryland, and they were talking about putting me in some other branch of the service, and I told them I'd enlisted for glider pilot. So they said that was fine, and so I was sent to Roswell, New Mexico.
And Roswell?
Then from there, they sent me to Albuquerque.
Okay.
I took my basic training there. There was a small class, about 10 of us, Corporal Spinelli. And then after that, they decided I got a letter. I was classified with along about several thousand as an excess glider trainee.
What does that mean, sir?
That means the program was cut. They had too many.
Oh, okay.
And I still have that letter at home. Then they asked me about, what I would like, and I said, well, I wanted to get into combat. So I said, I'd like to go to gunnery school. Well, they said, before you can go to gunnery school, you have to take a technical school. So I went to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and completed basic training for radio operator mechanic.
Okay.
And then after that, I didn't go to gunnery school. I was sent to advanced training as a radio operator for troop carrier, to, haul troops and supplies on transports like a C-47, C-54.
Real big planes.
Yeah, well, the 47 wasn't real big, but it did put all a pretty good load.
Mm-hmm.
It was the best plane the military ever made in that type. There's still some in service in Florida.
Mm.
And after that, I went down to Mississippi for further training. And after I was there, I went to Fort Benning. There we trained with the 101st airborne, dropping in one night, practice drops. One of the strange things about that plane, we had a full load one night, took off, was going about a half hour, 45 minutes. One of the engines cut out.
Oh, no.
That plane took us back to Fort Benning intact.
Is that right?
And that was pretty good on that, I thought.
How many engines did it have?
It had two.
And on one, you brought you all the way back.
One operator took us back.
Mm.
And in the meantime, before I went to radio school, I went with a girl in high school, and we were married when I was home on leave. And she was with me at Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and Grenada, Mississippi. Now, when I went to Fort Benning, she went back to Pennsylvania. We enjoyed ourselves while she was with me. We were able to, do a lot of things together.
I don't understand.
What?
No, go ahead. No, I understand. You had a good time before you went to Fort Benning.
Oh, yes.
Before she went back home.
Then I trained for Fort Benning, and after that training, I was assigned to Bearfield in the state of Indiana. And from there, we were assigned as crews, and I was scheduled to go overseas, and my grandmother got sick, and I had a 7-day leave.
But before you had this leave, was that the completion of your training?
Yes, it was.
Okay, good. Okay.
And then I went home, and I came back. I was reassigned to another crew. And we flew our C-47 down to Florida and Puerto Rico, and from there down the coast of South America to Brazil. We stopped there overnight. Then we took off for what they call Ascension Island in South Atlantic. We stayed there overnight, flew to North Africa. From North Africa, we flew up to southern England, and from there I went to my assigned base and outfit, which was the 71st Troop Carrier Squadron, 431st Troop Carrier Group. And that's where I stayed and trained for almost a year before the invasion. Mm. And we got to go down to London a lot and did a lot of sightseeing, but we did a lot of training too. We would be called out maybe at 12, 1 o'clock at night. 101st come out, and they'd board, and we'd sit there in the runway, then it was practice.
Right.
But it finally came time in 44 for the actual invasion. We were on another training, the 101st come out, and one of the guys says, "This is it." Now, how he knew, I don't know, but we all had a gut feeling that was it.
Right.
And then we took off probably around 12:30, and dropped 101st behind the German lines. We went back, picked up another load, took them over. Mm. Then after that, we flew 2 gliders at a time, loaded with troops, also behind German lines. They were supposed to disrupt, German communications, bridges, things like that, work with the French underground. Then after that, we kept flying. We'd fly cargo in as needed. We lost on the first initial troop, we probably lost a couple airplanes to ground fire. I never saw a German fighter during that operation.
Okay.
Then when Patton broke through and was run through France, we flew gasoline to him in 5-gallon cans. Mm. And as far as, they said he was stopped for lack of fuel, but we had plenty of gas and airplanes and crews to take it to him. What happened, I don't know.
Yeah.
So, and then we flew cargo in and stuff. Then I forget just the exact time, and it was in December of, I think, 44, the Battle of Bastogne.
Okay.
We flew supplies into them when the air was clear. One time we were going in to take them in, and my engineer, he was crazy anyway. He said, "Let's go join them." So we took our parachutes and our guns and jumped overboard, landed there. Now, we never were actually used in combat. We weren't trained like they were. But they held us in reserve, and we were there till Patton came through. Then we rejoined our outfit in England.
So you didn't have to fight it. You just
we just were there
on standby.
Standby, that's right. Mm-hmm. and went back to our base in England, and we stayed there and kept flying supplies in and out, and also at Eindhoven. That was McGermy's biggest mistake. He was going to cut through the German lines and divide them, but it happened to have they were waiting for us. And that's the first time I ever saw German fighters. It was at Eindhoven in Holland, when we dropped the 101st there. And they had heavy losses, and we lost a lot of planes there too, due to ground fire and fighters. And it was a disaster. We got back, and that's about the time we moved to Reims, France. Eisenhower's headquarters.
But before that, during all this loss, and when you first seen the German fighters, a lot of loss was taking place on both sides.
On both sides.
Did you come close to anything happening?
Well, we had bullet holes in the plane.
That's
one
close.
thing I was thinking about bullet holes, when we first dropped the first detachment on the first German territory, my engineer, we didn't have the doors on account of the drop. My engineer and I were laying watching the action on the ground and stuff. We were only flying about 500 feet. Now right between us, we're laying there, then a line of tracers and bullets came up right between us.
Whoa.
So we figured that was enough. So we went up to our seats and put our flak jackets back on.
You were flying without them?
No, we took them off when we went back.
Oh, okay.
We were flying with them on, but they were heavy and bulky at that time.
Yeah.
I mean, they would weigh you down. And
so before I interrupted you, you were on your way to France.
yeah, we moved over to Reims, France.
Okay.
And one thing about that, we were flying supplies and different things, and still flying drops. We also participated, a certain number of us, in the invasion of southern France after Normandy. It says in my discharge I did participate in the southern France invasion, but the Army has no records of it. They lost a lot of my records in a fire in '73, I think it was, in St. Louis.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to get things together, but they lost them, and they said it was up to me to prove anything.
How are you supposed to do that, right?
That's what I asked them.
Yeah.
And then what it's going to say before, we were stationed at Reims, and we saw these line of cars with troopers and stuff, infantry coming through. These officers sitting in there in German uniforms. That's when they came in to sign the surrender for Germany to end the war. It was interesting to watch at that time. And before that, in the fall of '44, I forget what month it was, it was in the fall sometime, we were near Reims, France, and we were coming back. I don't know where we were coming or going from. We were in the back of a truck. The tarp wasn't on. We were probably 12 or 15 of us. We hit a landmine. You can still feel the lift we had. The truck, it threw me out of the back into the side of the berm. I had 2 broken ribs, and my face was all covered with scratches and blood and stuff. It killed, and it threw the truck partially into the other lane, and hit another truck. It killed both drivers and several of the people there, and I was at a field hospital probably for a couple weeks till they patched me up, and I went back to my outfit. And they signed it there that the only thing I had, I was in a truck accident and I had my ribs taped. And they still couldn't find those records. So.
Wow.
But I was all right anyway. I was one of the lucky ones. I was blessed. I came back in one piece.
Yes, yes, you were. Yeah.
And after the war was over in Europe, I was sent back to the States for reassignment for training for the Pacific. I was home on leave when I got the good news here. He dropped a couple of bombs on Japan. Of course, they surrendered, and when I went back to report to the base where I was supposed to, I had enough points. They counted your discharge like 5 points for each battle star, each medal. You got 5 points a month. It was 1 point for each month overseas. So I had more than enough, and I was discharged. Went back. Well, my wife was living in Meadville at the time, and I went back there and lived there until '49. That's when I re-enlisted during the Berlin blockade. but I didn't participate in that because they sent me to the West Coast, assigned to an air sea rescue squadron.
Okay, 1 second. So how long were you discharged for? How long did were you out?
From 45 to 49.
So what made you want to go back in?
Well, I figured I was needed again.
Really?
Really?
Well, okay, go ahead. So 49, here we go.
49, and I went back in at 49, and while we were serving there, we would air sea rescue, and we would go to fly amphibians, B-17s, helicopters, C-54s, whatever was needed, we flew on. But I never got up in a helicopter. I didn't have the nerve. So after I was there, probably, I don't remember how long I was there with air sea rescue, the Korean War started, and we were assigned to larger airplanes, C-54s, flying out of Fort Lewis, Washington. At that time, we would be going maybe 2 weeks at a time. We would fly to Anchorage. We would stay there for crew rest for 2 or 3 days, and then another crew would bring a plane in, and we would fly it up to Shimya, an Aleutian chain, and that was the end of the world. But anyway, then from there we'd fly to either Japan or Korea. It was mostly Japan at the first until MacArthur regained Seoul and the Kimpo Airport. We did make a few drops there. What we did, we took troops over or supplies. And coming home, we would bring bodies home or cargo or whatever was necessary. We would fly to Wake Island. That's where we had another crew rest. Then we had the best one, the next one, Hickam Field, Honolulu.
Oh,
that was nice.
I know where that is.
Yeah. I don't know how many times. I must have been there 20, 25 times.
Yeah. I had the pleasure of being there this summer, and I just went through the Koli Koli Pass. So it's a beautiful place over there.
It is. That was my favorite place.
It's still mine.
Then we'd take off, and this time we're flying old prop jobs. And it would take about 12, 14 hours to fly from Hickam either to San Francisco or up to Fort Lewis, where we were based. We kept that up for probably in early '51. I started losing my hearing, and the flight surgeon told me it was from having those earphones on my ears all the time for maybe 12, 14 hours at a time. And he said, if you keep flying, you're going to lose your hearing permanently. He said, if you quit flying, he said, most of it should return. He had seen a few cases of it already. So I quit flying, and I was signed a G2 for a short time. Then I was in the 81st Troop Carrier Squadron. I became First Sergeant. And I was served quite a while there. Then I was transferred to Group Sergeant Major. And at that time, the wife was from the family, which Susan was born, her oldest girl, Nancy, was born before I went back into the service in '47. So I got out, and we went back to Indiana, Pennsylvania. And my wife died about 2 years ago in July.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, she was better off, and that's about it.
That's a lot, sir.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an awful lot. I mean,
Yeah.
you know.
One thing, after the war was over in France, we were assigned to a replacement depot in England. And we were there for probably 2 or 3 months, and they had what they called an open mess. You could eat any time of day you wanted, whatever you wanted they had. I gained a few pounds. Then we were sent, I think it was Liverpool, if I remember right, I'm not sure of that, where we boarded the Queen Mary. And then we come home. There was 15,000 troops on that boat, plus the crew, which was a lot of people.
It was.
We would sleep on deck one night and down below the next night. We would rotate.
Right.
And after a couple of days, I figured I need a shower, so I didn't realize that it was salt water. I was sorry afterwards I did it.
Yeah.
But then we docked in New York City. My wife was working up at Talon factory in Meadville during the war, and they listed the boats that were coming home with what ship outfits were on them, and she knew what day I docked in New York. And when I went to Indiantown Gap and spent the night there. Then I was processed and given 30 days leave.
Okay.
When I got off the bus in Meadville, where she lived, she met me at the front door.
Wow.
She knew I was coming.
Had you told her? Had you wrote?
No, no. And we, like all the other troops, we communicated with what they call V-mail.
V-mail?
Yeah, you'd write a letter, then they'd combine it into a small form.
Okay.
That's how they would get it. I wish I'd saved a couple of those now for posterity, but I wasn't thinking about that at the time.
So what, did she just had a feeling that you were coming home?
She saw the news where I was boarding from England and being docked in New York 4.5 days.
Mm.
She figured that out from what she could read in the newspaper.
Mm.
Then she inquired, and she knew I'd be, a couple of days before I'd been, processed and given my furlough.
Wow.
She had it all figured out, and I got home. She knew what time the bus was coming from New York into there. She had it down to exact science.
It's very nice, very good. Well, I know you were glad to see her.
Oh, you bet.
Yeah, I know that. Well, and your kids were okay at that time?
Oh, everybody. We didn't have any kids at that time.
Oh,
that was after World War II, I'm talking.
Oh, okay, all right.
We had a couple when I got out in January, I think it was 1953.
Okay.
And that's when we came out after the Korean War.
Oh, all right, all right. Now, so during your time, during the time that you spent overseas, during all these combat missions and these drops and things, I guess it sounds like you might have lost a few friends or a few.
We lost some. What was the worst thing at that time when you lost a crew? You had to pack up their belongings and send home.
Mm.
And of course, the radio operators, we were all in the same barracks. We knew each other just like friends or brothers, I guess you'd say. We went to eat together, trained together, and we lost a couple of them in the invasion, but not our losses were minimal for the the number was there.
Yeah.
When there was, you could look in the English skies during a bombing mission, as far as you could see from one end of the sky to the other was just bombers, B-24s, B-17s. It was the same way after the invasion with the C-47s and planes that flew over. C-46s, they carried troopers and supplies.
It was busy, that's for sure.
It was busy,
yeah.
But one thing I will say, I was in England probably approximately a year.
Okay.
But the English people, you couldn't ask for friendly people when we were there. And there was Americans all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
More American men than English men, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But we were treated very well.
I've heard that over and over again doing interviews here. So that's a good thing, But when you finally came home, when your tour was over, your last tour was over, you came home. You got out at that time.
Yes.
And you were discharged for good.
Yes, I was discharged, and I re-enlisted in '49.
Okay. When your service time was over, what did you do after that?
When I came out for the Korean War,
Yes.
I went to work as a salesman at a Penn furniture salesman in Indiana.
Okay.
And I worked there for 31 years till I retired at 62. I've been retired 25 years.
You have been retired 50?
Yeah.
25? That was Indiana, Pennsylvania again?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that was a lot less dangerous than what you've done for the last...
I would have to say, because we had before the Korean War, after I did a tour on flying B-29s, we would fly along over the sea just off of the Russian coast. And it was supposed to be a big secret what we were doing, but everybody knew it. We had a screen in the back of the plane there that we'd take out. They could tell from the dust or something in there that whether the Russians had detonated an atomic bomb or what was going on. And they were still doing that long after I got out, I understand. Because I talked to a fellow that enlisted there that went through the academy that he said when he went in, they were still flying them, doing that protection.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you got home, Mr. Wolfe, after it was all over, how was it trying to readjust to civilian life again?
Well, I didn't really have any problem myself, but a lot of people did.
I understand that.
But things seemed to go well for me.
Because I guess more or less because you decided on your own. You weren't forced to go in. You weren't drafted. You wanted to go to combat, so like you knew what the risks were. So
Yes.
I guess
But it never. We were like all Americans.
Right.
My buddy was going to go, but I wouldn't go. I'd be home.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Great optimism.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right. And you're right too. And one thing about the military, you know, those guys that you meet, your comrades in the service, sometimes they become closer to you than your own family members. You know,
right.
you become so tight because you got that military in common, and you've seen the same sorts of things, and it's hard to explain it to people. You know, when you come home. Yeah. I understand that, sir. So one thing I want to do, I want to go back to before you went into service. Where did you go through basic? Did you go to basic training at all?
I went to basic training at Albuquerque, New Mexico.
In Albuquerque? And how long was your training about? Do you remember that at all?
Oh, roughly 6, 8 weeks. I don't remember exactly. We would learn how to break down the carbine, the Garand, I think was the rifle that used 45, clean them and reassemble them, hikes. There was one time we went for a hike in the mountains there near Albuquerque, and they said we was going to take our gas mask. We was going to have a gas attack. Well, they did, but there was one fellow there that he didn't take his gas mask. He loaded it with his backpack with candy bars. and the first break we had, he was selling candy bars. Later, probably an hour or two after that, we did have a tear gas attack. And he went back in an ambulance. He didn't make it. Whatever happened to him, I don't know. I didn't see him again. But he figured he'd make a little money.
Oh boy, I can imagine that. I mean, you got so many different characters that.
Oh, you bet you do. You meet a lot of different characters.
Oh man!
But most of them you meet are nice guys.
Oh, they are. But everybody, every once in a while you run into some people. Always got something going on. There's always that one whippersnapper's got something up his sleeve.
Yeah,
you know,
well, he was one of them.
Yeah, sure he was. And so during your training. Your basic training, besides these walks and these gas attacks and things like that, they fed you real well and they treated you really nice.
Oh yeah, we were fed. I wouldn't say it was always well, but we were fed. The best feeding I had was at that replacement depot in England I told you about, waiting transportation back to the States. We could eat anything we wanted and I'd gain a few pounds.
Well, for 80, what are you, 83, 87, sir? For 87, you're in excellent physical shape that I can tell right now. Don't see too many people in great shape in their 60s.
I look at it like I've been blessed.
You have been blessed, you know, because all of what you did. I mean, this is an enormous amount of combat that you've experienced. A lot of missions that you were on, and for you to spend only 2 weeks in the hospital because of the
2 weeks in a field
landmine.
Hospital. Right.
You're definitely blessed. You know, there's someone that has definitely on your shoulder watching over you, and that's a wonderful thing. And you have that spirit about you now. You could tell that, you know, there's a great spirit that's surrounding you. So
well, I'm enjoying every day
I
have.
You can tell.
I'm going to have, but while I'm here, I'm going to have a joy, and I have a wonderful family that supports me.
That's wonderful.
Especially when my wife was ill and when she died, and afterwards. I have 4 daughters, and I tell you, you couldn't ask for a better family.
Yeah, well, that's wonderful, sir.
This is one of them here, Susan.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Well,
you think anything else I told you that I should mention?
Can't think of anything else that you told me. He's in the later years now. He talks more about his experiences.
Oh, really?
A lot more. You know,
than when you first got home.
I guess he was busy.
Yeah.
He talks about it a lot more.
When I was younger, I talked very little about it.
Right, I understand that. Yeah. And that's common for a lot of us that has been in the military or whatever. So we just kind of just try to fit into society when we come back, and we just because they don't get it. And then a lot of people may be a little bit nervous about you if you start telling them what you've been through and what you've done. So we kind of talk to each other. You find another veteran, and then you're able to express a lot of things. For
one strange thing that did happen to me while I was in England, I never saw anybody that I knew back in the States. But one day I was at a service club in London there. I met two fellows I knew from Indiana.
Wow,
We had a good visit.
It was great, wasn't it? It was probably the best thing ever. That's wonderful when you see somebody that you actually know from your same hometown.
One famous person from Indiana that went into the service was Jimmy Stewart.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was from there. His dad had a hardware store there. And over in England, he was commander of a bomber outfit.
Really?
And he used to land at different when he landed different bases, he would inquire if there's anybody from Indiana. But the time he did land at our base, I was gone.
Oh.
So I didn't get to see him.
And what would he do? Have you heard any stories on what he would do for the people that were from Indiana, or he just asked?
He just chat with them,
Oh, okay.
compare notes as far as I know.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, that's a great story, sir. I have a couple pictures of Mr. Wolfe here. I have a picture of Mr. Wolfe in 1942. Mr. Wolfe, you want to explain where you were? And let me say another thing too. Again, as your daughter said, you're starting to talk about your military service more now. You're very, very sharp on all your details. And that's a gift right there. That's a blessing right there, because
I guess you're right.
There's been so many people that they get maybe 2 minutes into their conversation. You got to draw a lot of things from them, but it's just like it was yesterday to you. So your mind is not failing you.
I'm not sorry I was there, but I wouldn't want to do it again.
Oh no, I know you wouldn't. Where were you right here, sir? In 1942.
I was outside the apartment where my wife and her family lived in Indiana, Pennsylvania.
Indiana, Pennsylvania. So this was when you in your uniform, when you probably came home from basic, or
That would be about it.
just about when he came home from basic, in front of his wife's family's house, looking great, with his uniform on, waiting to go inside to give his wife a hug. Here you go, Jacob Wood at glider pilot training in the college, second row, first on the left. Second row, first on the left. So this would be you?
That's me, right here.
Okay. And that was at glider school.
That was at Teal College in Greenville, Pennsylvania.
Greenville, Pennsylvania. This is Mr. Wolfe right here. Okay, so that was in around 1942 too, or
42, 43, maybe.
42 or 1943. This is Mr. Wolfe at Reading, England in 1944, probably in the fall before he transferred to French Air Base.
Yeah, that picture was taken at English photographers. It wasn't the better ones.
That's right.
When I sent that picture home, my wife looked at it and thought I was fat, and she thought it was she laughed.
She thought you were fat?
He was a skinny guy.
Really?
When he was
I was
It
probably,
look
No,
fat
you
at
look
over
fat to
here.
me.
I'd probably 130 when I went, if that went.
Really? You don't look that much more right about there. Maybe about 160, 150. And this is Mr. Wolfe in 1945. Where was this taken, sir?
That was taken in Indiana. The photographer's name, Douglas Studio. That was in probably August 1945.
And you have your wings, and
I
you
have
have your
my
good
wing.
conduct ribbon,
Yeah,
and you have a service medal from where?
ETO.
From ATO.
I flew 23. I flew 23 combat missions that where you were subject to enemy fire.
23 combat missions.
Yeah, and I had the Air Medal with a cluster. I had 7 battle stars, which gave me points to get home.
And the amount of points, do you remember how many points that was in order for you to come
I think it was around 35 or 40. I'm not sure, but I had more than enough to get out at that time.
And once again, Mr. Wolfe, what was it that they calculated? They calculated your missions that you flew. They calculated the
Your months overseas.
months overseas.
And any decorations, anything you had, you know, like an air medal or combat, your like those battle stars.
Right.
That was 7. Like Eindhoven, you got it for that.
Mhm.
And D-Day,
Okay.
where we were subject to heavy enemy action.
Hmm. And so some admin person would sit there and go, okay, Sergeant Wolfe has 7 points for this, 3 points for this, and so then they add it up and he goes, okay, you got 35 points, you can go if you want.
Yeah, I think I had around 45 or 50 actually.
Wow. Wow.
But that's exactly what happened. There was a fellow there looking over my records, interpreting it, and
Right.
figuring it out.
Hmm. Out of everything, you say, so start with the bad here. Out of everything that you dealt with during your entire enlistment, sir, you know, from the time that you went through in the basic to the time that you came home, what was the worst thing that you experienced while
Getting away from my family.
being away from your family? That's wonderful. That is really, really nice thing to say. That's true. I know it is.
I kept busy during, we had activities, movies. We'd go to a few pubs and have a couple beers and things like that off duty hours.
Hmm.
Oh, I just remembered something.
Go ahead.
He told me that you saw Glenn Miller's last
Oh,
Concert?
yeah.
Where?
Glenn, just
Okay.
before he went to France, we landed at the base there and he was performing in one of the hangars. And that was his last performance because shortly after he took off for France, it was lost over the channel.
Really?
That was his last performance that he gave. And I was fortunate enough to be there and I enjoyed it.
Was he just doing it for? Who was he doing the concert for?
He was just
USO?
It was just it was just an impromptu thing for the people at the base.
And his whole orchestra and all?
Well, he had a good many of them there. I don't know whether they're all
Wow. Wow. Imagine that. It was a nice concert, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Wow.
I was up. They had a place called Sunset Grove up near home, Indiana.
Mhm.
Before the war, that a lot of the big bands played in.
Mhm.
I was there a couple of times, and saw him and many other ones.
You were a music lover, I guess?
Well, I like the music
Yeah.
better than today.
Right, right.
But
Yeah.
that was my generation.
Yes, yes. And that was very good music. I
Yes,
enjoy that music myself today. Did you want to start to say something else? Okay. Now, being away from your family was one of the worst, which I can understand, and I can probably attest to myself. Usually when I do things on my own, I kind of just try to keep myself distracted. I don't start really thinking about them until I'm almost on my way home, because otherwise it'll bother me a lot. So I understand that.
Well, one other thing I might mention, when I was home on furlough before I went overseas, my wife was working in Pittsburgh for the ODT, Office of Defense Transportation.
Mm-hmm.
I went down, of course, to visit her, and we decided to get married one morning real early. There was a 3-day waiting period, blood work that had to be done, and we had all that accomplished. We saw a judge, got a waiver on the 3 days, had our blood test, and towards the evening, my sister and brother-in-law stood up for us. We got married in Pittsburgh at that time.
That was a very happy day for you, wasn't it?
It was.
Yep.
Very happy.
How long were you married altogether?
64 years.
God bless you. Boy,
It takes 2 people to make a marriage. One can't do it. You have to have give and take and two, and I think she did most of the giving. I took most of the taking.
Well, she had a wonderful husband, from what I can tell right now, and great children, from what I can see from
I
what your
do.
daughter here. So, now, as I asked you about the bad, you know, I always like to end on a good note with the whole military experience. You're from the beginning to the end. You may have the same answer, but what was the best thing that happened to you from throughout your military career?
Just
best that you-
experience, I guess you'd say. I like to fly. That's one part of the reason I got out. I couldn't fly anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And right now I'm trying to get the VA to approve permission for me to get hearing aids, for them to pay for it.
Okay.
And a year ago last July I found, and I'm still waiting to hear. Every time we call this, it's got a different story.
The DAV won't help you?
The VA, well, they might eventually, with a little push. But as of now, I'm still waiting.
Well, I'll talk to you after we get finished with this. But there's a secret about this whole thing. But anyway, Mr. Wolfe, is there anything else that you think that you might want to let us know about your career in the military, or anything you want to let us know about what you may be doing right now? I mean, you said
I'm
you're
just enjoying myself.
enjoying yourself and your family. You have
I
grandchildren?
I go to, what?
Do you have grandchildren?
I have 7 grandchildren and how many great-grandchildren?
Oh, you
5.
5? Yep.
Mhm.
So you're the top man, right?
I hope so.
yes, you are. Any of the grandsons or any of the granddaughters try to go in the military? or
Well,
talk
I
to
have
them?
one granddaughter, the youngest one right now. She's considering the Air Force, but she's still waving around.
Right.
She's working. She graduated this past June.
Okay.
She's working in Altoona, Pennsylvania. Has a part with a couple other girlfriends. She's the only one. I did have one that Beth.
was-
Yes, I was going to say. I had
She's in the
one.
Marines?
Beth was in the Marines.
That's what I was in for 7 years. Was in the Marine Corps.
Mhm.
And Kelly was in the
Army
National
Reserve.
Army Reserve.
So there was 2 of them was in and 1 wavering.
Oh.
I had a good friend who was a brother of my brother-in-law.
Uh-huh.
He went into the Marines, and he came out, but he never talked too much about what happened. He was in the Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
I think he had a rough tour,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
like a lot of them.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you ever talk to him anymore, or is he?
He's dead now.
Oh, he is. Yeah. Well.
He died here a few years ago, maybe 5.
Do you have anybody that you were in the service with, or anybody that entered around your time that you met from home, that you might have met at a VFW or Legion or anything like that?
No, and most of them I knew they're all gone.
They're all gone. Okay. Well, I am certainly glad that you took the time to tell us your story today, sir. And it's,
So am I. I enjoyed it very much.
and it's something that your family will have forever. So, you know, something that you'll never have to remember any of this again, because of the simple fact, when Chelsea produces this, she finishes it, when she sends you this DVD, all of what we discussed today will be on the DVD. The other DVD will stay here at the museum, and the third one will go down to the Library of Congress. So it'll always be available to you, your family, your great-grandchildren, everybody will always be able to see what Grandpa had to say this day. So I thank you for especially for your military service. We thank you. America thanks you. You know, and I thank you for spending this time with us for this last hour today, sir. And I wish you many, many more years of great living with your wonderful family. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Wolfe, have
Thank
a great
you.
day.